Welcome everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri and Burong people of the Kulin Nations and their elders, their ancestors, their elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to also acknowledge all of you who have shown up for this conversation and to listen deeply to our brother Jeremy Nikora about his journey and his life, what's going on. And I'd also like to give a massive hug to our brother Jeremy, who is sitting with us today and being present. Jeremy is a mentor, a youth worker, a community development practitioner who has been working in youth and community spaces for over 10 years, but I know that that's probably 10 years paid, but it's probably been like 40 years of life. Spaces. If I know anything about our cultural spaces, like we're always in that space. So yeah, welcome Jeremy. It's nice to have you here.
Awesome. Kia ora, sister. Thank you. I think in that list of stuff that you were thinking up, I think used car salesman's probably another one that, a lot of people they don't realize, but it's my used car salesman history that's kind of helped me open a few doors. So yeah, no, here to you for your beautiful invitation. Real privilege to be here. Yeah, talking about the stuff that we kind of just do naturally. Well, maybe not naturally, but we just do it because we're just in it. So yeah, just really privileged to be able to have a chat, have a kōrero, share some stories. Yeah, have some crack ups hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, I guess we'll get right into it. Like, Jeremy, we want to know about you, about your journey, like used car salesman, man, bro. tell us it all.
Wow. No, I laugh about it. And I've spoken about it a few times, but also, so I'm obviously from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I grew up in the capital of New Zealand, Gisborne. That's on the east coast of the North Island. But I was actually born in a little place called Otorahanga, just down in the King Country, about 45 minutes south of Hamilton. But yeah, when I was very young, I went to live over in Gisborne. So I grew up on the east coast, and just been I don't know, I think cruising the world. It feels like it. It feels like I've had a pretty massive journey around the place. So I've been really lucky to had some really cool experiences. I went into the Navy after high school. Did a little bit of traveling around the world, and ended up back in Australia. I laugh about the used car salesman because I got into selling, like telesales, and then got into sales repping and stuff. So before I was in the community game, I was kind of in the selling, account management sort of space for about maybe 10, 15 years. And I think that's where I kind of developed my ability to open doors, I suppose. And I always laugh about it, and I always tell people I was actually a real bad salesman. I think I was just the nightmare or the headache for all my managers that used to manage me in terms of sales specifically. But I found I had the gift of the gab. So a lot of my clients, even though my sales from a company perspective weren't that good, my clients loved me, and that was just because of that relationship sort of building, sort of natural skill, I suppose, to connect with people. And when I got into the community development work, that's where it kind of really came out and it shone. So yeah, it's I've been in Melbourne for about 2008, a few years now, and but yeah, been doing the voluntary or the community stuff since about 12-ish. I guess in a paid capacity since about 2012. But yeah, like you were saying, we tend to do this kind of stuff naturally and do a lot of volunteer stuff. So yeah, been around the traps. Yeah.
Tell us more about your work with Māori movement and your nurturing Māori practices? Like, is that
Yeah,
developed more in Melbourne, or like,
yeah.
yeah, or obviously from your roots in Aotearoa, but yeah.
Yeah, no, look, yeah, it might surprise people, but I'm a 72 child, so I know as us Polynesians, we always don't look our age. So, but we grew up in a time where a lot of our people weren't brought up in the language or the culture. It was kind of right in that shift where things were changing, and our Māori culture was just starting to come back. It was just being implemented in the kindergarten system and stuff like that. So, so when I was off sort of traveling around the world, I guess I wasn't strong in identifying as Māori. I lived over in Europe and England and France, and I guess that was always kind of a part of me when I needed it to be. When you see other cousins around, over there, and you're like, hey, kia ora, bro, and but it wasn't really until I moved back down here and I actually started two things kind of kicked it off. I actually came back, and I've got quite a big family down here, whereas I was living up in Sydney for a few years, and I was the only one up there and kind of just doing the thing. And so two things were the real key for me was coming back to reconnect with my family. And a lot of young kids and a lot of nieces and nephews that I didn't really know that well. So that was a real big shift in terms of just reconnecting with whānau. And the other main thing was I joined a kapaka crew. So it's Tihani Te Hononga o Ngā Iwi here in Cranbourne. So they were the kind of the two catalysts for, I guess, me really wanting to find that connection back to my culture. And it all kind of stemmed from there. I was still in sales, but then I got an opportunity. I was doing some volunteer work with a youth academy, a rugby league academy, and that's then I could see the potential of what I could do, I suppose. And then I found that passion of working with young kids, especially, and then could see how sports and stuff was a real engager for them, and it just sort of sparked off from there. Yeah, and then I got the opportunity to go and work for the Melbourne Rebels to run a rugby program there, and that was my first paid gig, paid role, and doing community stuff. And it was a funny story, and lots of people have heard it, and I kind of have a crack up about it because it was a real kind of real crazy time because there was nothing really set up, and I was really fortunate that my sales skills came to the fore where I could kind of knock on doors without being too shy about it, and just beg people to help me set up the stuff for these young kids. And same with the community. So from there I just managed to really create some strong relationships that have stayed with me the whole way through.
And so what did you see in the community? What need did you see in the community that I guess made you realize that you wanted to create these spaces, you wanted to activate these spaces?
I think again it goes back to my own journey, identifying the stuff that I'd really missed, and then seeing an opportunity where through kapaka and then later on through Modako was the real one that opened up some pretty big doors in terms of te ao Māori and realizing the real beauty of what our tupuna actually had. And then when I was out there working and seeing a lot of the disconnection with our young kids, I kind of pieced the two together and realized that that the real opportunity was there. If we could try and find a way of reconnecting those kids, not with the image of what I would call a colonial view of our people would be, but to actually try and get past that, and then to really instill some of that real beauty of the knowledge. That was that, and that has been a driving force for me to be able to go, there's these amazing values and attributes that our forefathers actually had that were actually blocked off. So it's trying to piece that back together and pull that back out into the forefront, so our Māori community themselves will accept it, because that's half the battle, is that we carry a lot of mamai, carry a lot of weights from being colonized, but then we've had a lot of generations that have grown up in the real negative side of that colonization process, to the point where they, a lot of our community, the only thing they know of being Māori is in gangs or being raised in violent situations and stuff like that. So, for me, and that's not to lay judgment or anything on anybody's journey, but the real thing is to try and bring our people back to that point where they actually see the real beauty of our culture, and then realize that it actually has a place in today's society. So yeah, that was the big thing. The thing I saw was that a real shift in the generations. So we with our kaumātua and our elders that are still alive, or and the youth today, where they kind of still exist in kind of real separate worlds, and it's actually trying to find that bridge to bring the two together. Because our young people, we sometimes we make the mistake of trying to apply too many of the old ways that we were brought up in on the young ones, and it's it's just hard, it's unrealistic, because that's not their world that they grew up in, so it's not a context that they physically can understand straight away. So yeah, so it's a bit of a long-winded answer to that question, but yeah, they were kind of some of the things that I felt, there was just opportunities. It wasn't so much problems, but in understanding the landscape, I actually could see where things could actually fit to fill in some of the gaps.
I understand everyone's journey is different, and there's no cookie cut approach for each person to get to a certain space of reconnecting with their culture. But if you were to try and support young people, or even our older generation, and navigating their way back to connecting with culture, where would you start?
Oh man, and you're right, totally. There's no one set approach, and it really has to start with the individual, has to start with that person, because everyone's got their different journey that they've made to get to a point where they might be in a situation where they need help. So it's really just trying to to sit that person down and then help them kind of decide exactly what they want to do and where they want to go. And it's I guess everyone of us that actually work in these spaces, we're not in it because obviously you make heaps of money. We're in it obviously because we have that real desire to make change. But it's a hard role, and a lot of the times we don't see the results. We might never see them, or we don't see them until years later when someone bumps into you in the street and and they introduce you to their wife, or hey, this is thing, and those kind of things you kind of you pray for. But yeah, there's no one answer. Unfortunately, it's just everything has to be taken by whoever walks in the door, and then trying to sit down and work out a method for them, so that they feel comfortable following.
Yeah. With your men's medicine group, can you tell us a little bit about that? I'm really intrigued of what would you be doing and connecting and talking about. And
so I'll just clarify. So men's medicine was that's another kaupapa, that's another men's same thing as the tutua hauora. So but same purpose, same passion. And our brothers up there, up Queensland, that actually set the men's medicine one up. They the same concept was just bring specifically they started off with the tane, but with men, because really at the end of the day, if we can get our tane to find the space to be able to deal with and communicate and things, then there's so many different things that come off our male percentages of high unemployment, high, domestic violence, high everything else, all the negative stuff. So if we can work on our tani first, then that actually takes a bulk of the way of a lot of the actual problems. Anyway, but yeah, so tutoa hauora really came from a series of suicides. And suicide's been an ongoing, like, it's not something new. It's just been something that I felt that we have this real hit, boom, and when something happens, and then after a while we sort of go down and we kind of not forget about it, but it kind of goes to the back of the mind, and then something else happens and it comes up again, and then we raise the priority and we look at it, and then we slip back into our routine. And we'd had a series of young people that had committed suicide down here in the southeast, especially over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, and it just got to a point where it was just in the schools, it was just everywhere, and I felt that again with some of the knowledge, the old Māori knowledge that I'd been lucky enough to start learning myself. I felt that there was a real space to start with men, just to start off with, of any age, to create a space where we could actually learn how to talk, where we could learn how to sit comfortably and just divulge as much or as little as we want, and it could be a space not necessarily for those at the extreme end of the spectrum in terms of real bad depression or real suicidal tendencies. It could be for just the normal father who's struggling because struggling to manage being the provider and the disciplinarian, or the just being a father, just being a good father. All those things they come with their different weight. And again, that's not to say that that our wahine don't suffer from that stuff as well, but I really felt that there was a real need to focus on our tāne from a real cultural perspective, and again tying in that knowledge that I'd sort of been learning about old pūrākau, about our old atua, really coming back from really bringing some of that old knowledge, and then because there's so many awesome practitioners back home now that are reviving a lot of these stories, and then they're actually applying those principles to the modern day challenges that a lot of us are facing. A lot of it has to do with cultural disconnection, but they're really interweaving in a scientific way stories about tāne, tangaroa, a lot of those old atua, and they're actually really creating these systems that are actually helping to heal people. And it's not, some of them are in conjunction with Western methodologies, but a lot of it's to do with just reconnecting with who we are internally, and that's actually helped a lot of our whānau back home, and it's actually happening here to figure out stuff that the Western lens hasn't been able to explain to them. So tutoa hauora was started as a way to bring our tāne together, to workshop, I suppose it's a bit of a thing word, but just to create a wānanga space where we could just sit. Originally it was meant to be face to face and we could do some tāne stuff, but COVID hit last year, and then next minute we're having to do stuff online. But yeah, that was a real initiative between myself and Tash Bellwin from Abundant Healing. So Tasha's, if I'm honest, Tasha's the real, she's the qualified counsellor, qualified sports, physio, but is a real, her taha wairua side, is amazing. So she was the balance, from the ira tāne side to the ira wahine side, and we created just this amazing, beautiful space, and we just put the call out. And I don't know. Actually, I don't know whether I should say it, but you know, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. But a lot of my family actually started seeing Tash in the last sort of 12 months, and well, 6 to 8 months. But yeah, and I don't know whether I'm the common denominator on that, but I just like to think that I've kind of opened the door for them. But you know, and whether my name comes up all the time in some of their counselling sessions, who knows? But you know, but she's been a real blessing for that cope up with that initiative, and you know, I was yeah, really fortunate that she was able to offer up that partnership and be because she's a kaimiri as well, so she does a lot of miri stuff, but yeah, she's very close to our Wairua side. Yeah, and that in itself has been a massive learning experience for a lot of our especially our men, to be able to feel comfortable to sit in a space and then have someone that, you know, that's from a wahine perspective can read things about you. Yeah.
So when did you start that?
So we we were running all from about July last year, right through to Christmas. Like I said to you, it was meant to be a one weekend a month wānanga, but COVID hit, and then we started on Sundays and just see how it goes. You know, we start for about an hour and a half, and then the hour and a half became 2 hours, and then it actually became every Sunday for 5 months. So you know, and you know, it was a big commitment. You know, when you go into these things, it's like, let's just have a crack and just see how it goes. And then it was huge, not in terms of numbers, but it was never about, you know, getting the masses. It was actually about just creating something that would then help create a life of its own. And then you know, the 10 to 12 regulars that we had now, as we come into this year, some of those guys were at a really awesome turning point in their lives already, but we're starting to talk about, you know, how they can then become part of that mentorship sort of group or approach, because December and then January, we both had a break because it was a big 6 months. It was so. Yeah, so we had a break, and we're just starting back this Sunday, actually, our fortnightly sessions. So Sunday between 10:30 and 12. I'd probably go to 12:30, but we always say 12. Yeah.
You gotta give a little bit of leeway for time, like just to mingle a little at the end.
Yeah, Māori time, 12 o'clock Māori time. Yeah, so we start those back up again, and then there's a wānanga 1 day program, 1 day events. I think it's the weekend after that. Yeah.
So have you guys been up in person, or has it mainly been online?
It was mainly online last year. We had a one day gathering at the end of last year when we finally were able to get it come out of lockdown. I think it was the end of November. And then, yeah, it was amazing because, you know, a lot of these guys had caught up. All they knew of was the little square on the laptop of the faces. Some of our boys knew each other, but others, you know, it was the first time they all came into the space together, which again, I think it worked out the way it was meant to be, because some of our guys, you know, they were to get them on, you know, to get them into that zone. It was actually better to be online because they could actually have their cameras off. They could start with their cameras off, and we were happy with that. They could even be on mute. They didn't need to even, you know, contribute anything. They could just be on mute, have their cameras off, and just sit to listen. And then after, you know, a week, then the next week, you know, one of them would have their cameras on, and they still wouldn't say anything. But then over the time, then they would actually start introducing themselves, and then, you know, and again, it's just putting yourself into that space without having to feel pressured to contribute, because it's all in the listening to the other guys' experiences, and that's where that's where the powerful part was happening. Because, you know, for me and Tash, we could kind of steer the conversation if we wanted to, but most of the time it was just the guys would just start the conversation about, you know, how their week had been. And then if something had kind of popped up that kind of troubled them or they had issues with, then they'd share it. And then someone might go, oh, yeah, that happened to me, and blah, blah, blah. And then there's a really casual, informal way of them actually working out their problems together without us having to come up with the answers all the time. Because, again, my used car salesman in me is like, I might act like I know all the answers, but really I don't, so, but, Tash was amazing for that. She could really put a lot of things into a really good context that the guys were like, oh, yeah. And then, we, what the tutor, actually, I'll backtrack a little bit, what the tutor really was launched from was off the back of the Shop Row series of community shows from last year, which was in March. So for the whānau that don't know, Shop Row is a show, a play, a play, I suppose. It's a bit, I don't know, it sounds a bit funny, but that was created by New Zealand Māori actor Rob Mokaraka. And it is just a story about his own journey from going to a point where he tried to commit suicide by acting crazy enough for the police to shoot him. They did, but not fatally, thankfully. And then it shared his journey from that point to realizing, he needed to actually get help with a lot of stuff that he'd been carrying. And then, from there, he just created this, he wrote down his experience, and then he created it into a bit of a storytelling opportunity where then he started going around the community. And Rob, beautiful man. I'd actually heard about it, and again, because we're suffering from a few suicides, I'd heard about what he was doing over there, and I just reached out to him. And I did that with Māori movements as well, like you mentioned before, the Brother Bees. So for me, it's like I'll keep an eye on what's happening over in Aotearoa, because they've been doing some really good stuff, and then I'll reach out to people and say, hey, you want to come over here? And that's all I've done, is just found resources, found knowledge over back home, approach heaps, and then the ones that yep, and mainly the ones that get annoyed because I'll just keep tapping them. I'm like, they're really annoying. Poking, hey, you want to come over here? Yeah, so we had Rob Mokaraka come over. He delivered his shows. We set it up so that he had 3 shows, one out west in the centre of the city, and then one out in the southeast here. And from there, it really spurned this movement of people that went to see his shows, because his shows weren't just about men, but families that went there and wahine that heard his story, and they came out. And the thing that really I guess touched me about that time was that there were whānau that were in our Maurako sort of kapaka sort of environment, that we knew each other really, really well. And then through his stories, they were brave enough to actually come out and talk about stuff that they had been experiencing. And then you go, hey, what's like, we've been living together pretty much for the last 3 years, doing kaupapa after kaupapa, sometimes 6-7 days a week, and I never even thought about that. I never knew that's what you were going through. So that's what I think has been one of the most powerful things to come out of there, especially last year with COVID and all the changes in the lockdown, is that it made us really sit and think about what our people, those that are closest to us, are going through sometimes, and we tend to miss it because we get so caught up in other stuff. So there was, out of the men's wellbeing forum, Tutoa Hauora, that was the origin of it, was basically around when Rob come over, the Shop Row, and that really rippled through the community. So, and I know there's when Rob goes live, and he's still doing shows now, like I think he's stuck over at Great Barrier Island in Auckland because he was delivering a show and then they went into lockdown. So I think he might still be stuck on there at the moment. So, but I know that there's a lot of whānau that through his show came from Melbourne that I see that they'll still comment on his things and like his posts and stuff like that. So again, that's for me, that's one of the biggest things is regardless of the kaupapa, the actual topic is about trying to connect our whānau here in Melbourne with knowledge that's over back home. Yeah, same with Rangi Mātamua through his Matariki series. As I say, I heard what he was doing back home and thought, oh man, that'd be me. Most of the time it's because stuff that I really like, and I was like, oh man, I'd like to know that. So yeah, so I just reached out to Rangi and said, bro, you don't know me, but I'm this Māori whānau over in Melbourne. We're doing kapaka and mauraka and all this cool stuff. You want to come over and, hang out with us for a little bit? And then, he just said, oh, yeah, cool, yep. And then, so he came and did a show over here for the community. And then we had a wānanga down in Portsea where he came with his daughter. And from that, a lot of people have started really looking at the maramataka and applying that to their everyday living now, and it's opened up windows for other people. So I think, at the end of the day, that's probably my jam. That's what I like doing, reconnecting our whānau here, because it's important that we stay connected. Okay. Did I even breathe? Did I even breathe?
You can breathe now.
yeah.
Drink your juice.
I'll have a drink of my juice.
Oh, it's so important that we see reflections of ourselves, hey? I spent years here thinking that I was going crazy because I couldn't see a reflection of myself, or I was in spaces that I couldn't see. I could see maybe 15% of me or 20%, but there wasn't that depth of me as a personal part of my culture reflected in other people. And when you don't, the amount of reflection you see in another person within you, if you only see 15%, you've got to fill that gap with a distraction if you still want to come out. And that distraction can be anything. Can be drink, can be this, can be lots of different things. To not be able to, get to a point of 100% and true deep connection and conversation.
And when you think about, I guess, our process from that colonization perspective, my grandparents and even my great-grandparents, that reflection of themselves was slowly chipped away. And then, by the time that they got to their children, that 75% that my great-grandparents had, and their children, that then became like, maybe 60%. And then in their children, my parents, that became like 50%. So, as that generational chipping away happened, by the time it came to our generation, we're looking for something that we kind of know. We don't really understand what it is, but we know it's in here somehow. And then, my beautiful partner Tance, we were cracking up about it the other day because we were talking to my 9-year-old boy about what we used to do when we were young, his age, and we could go off on our bikes or go off into town and be gone all day, and we just had so much freedom, and we could go and we knew that we could go to our friends' houses and their parents were kind of like our own parents. They'd feed us. And then, but again, if we got into trouble, like they could tell us off, and then they'd tell our parents, and then we get a double telling off. It was just it was a funny moment because we were reflecting about it. It was like, man, we're kind of like in that golden era where, we could get away with or go and just had so much freedom before, society started becoming a little bit more dangerous and parents became a little bit more, close. And then, I'm sure it's still that same somewhere in New Zealand, in some of those rural communities or, closer communities, but definitely you don't get that in the cities. And that's, a reflection that I thought, there was, that was a beautiful time. But then again, from a cultural perspective, we were at that cusp where we kind of just missed the boat where kohanga reo was just starting sort of in the middle 80s. And then, there was still kapaka and stuff like that, but there was starting to this real slow resurgence of our culture. So by the time I'd finished school in the 1990s, there was a real cultural revitalization process that we kind of missed. So now, you know, kids in the back home, like, man, they'll come over and they'll be fluent in Te Reo Māori. And you kind of hear it and go, oh, man, I kind of wish I had these little 9-year-old going, oh, and I'm like, whoa, man, your reo is so beautiful. You know, he's been brought up in it. And so, yeah, it's kind of this real balance. It's like, man, I love the freedom that we had. But then again, you know, we missed that cultural, real strong cultural revitalization time.
Yeah.
It's you know, that's the beauty of our culture at the moment, is that, you know, and obviously I talk about the Māori culture because that's my journey, but you know, we've got strong Pacifica cultures all around, and you know, the good thing is that, you know, no matter how hard they tried, like we you know, we're still here. And I shared a documentary about some of the land wars on our Te Hononga Ibu page the other day, and I said, man, this really makes me sad, because there was so much worry and angst for our tupuna back in the, you know, the 1850s right through the 1900s. And you know, just thinking about some of those old chiefs and those old rangatira that they had been in this period where so much disposition had happened, and then their language had started being taken away from them, and they were right around those 1860s to 1890s, where some massive changes culturally was happening, and our people were starting to suffer for it. And I just, you know, sometimes that really makes me humble when I think about, you know, those ones that have passed, you know, what would have been going on in their mind when they were right on their deathbed, you know, when they were just there. They'd done all that they could, they'd fought, they'd had fights against the British, and had, you know, effectively lost because a lot of the land had been taken. And I shared that conversation because there was this beautiful, there's a beautiful series on at the moment around some of the land wars and things like that, told by our own people, and it's sad, but it's quite uplifting to think about where we are now. And I said on my post, I said, man, if I could had one way of like sending a message back in time to those tupuna and say, you know, don't worry, as they're in their deathbed and their last few breaths of worrying about what's going to happen to their people and their mokopuna, you know. That'd be the best gift I could think of actually giving them, is saying, you know, don't worry, we're still here. We're still fighting. Look, we're alive. You know, we're not the same, but we are. And we're still here, in our cultures, you know, so strong. So anyway, sorry, just going on that journey.
You're like still fighting on other whenua too, eh? Like
yeah.
Fighting at home, like you're still
Yeah.
fighting to connect on.
Man, I'm fighting here. Yeah.
Like, what are some of the challenges or like differences that you see or feel being a Māori, like indigenous practitioner here as a visitor on this whenua?
Yeah, you know, it's been, that in itself has been a real learning experience. Anyway, it was funny. I'll share the story. It's all about stories. But when Rangi come over and we had this, we had the wānanga down in Portsea, and then I got one of the local, this beautiful Aboriginal man, Lionel Louch. He does a lot of walks, guided tours around the Mornington Peninsula, and takes a lot of people down and shows them areas, and then talks about the natural plant life. Amazing knowledge. He came in. I asked him to come in and do a session with, because we had it's probably about 80 or 90 of us from the community, not just from Tihani or Maurako, but from the broader community. The brother Sione come over from Museum, Victoria, Melbourne Museum. And so Lionel did this for about 3 hours, just spoke about his culture. It wasn't a real heavy kind of, you know, wasn't a real heavy negative kōrero. It was really uplifting, and said, you know, these are, and he showed some of the stuff that they did and explained a lot of you know, cultural knowledge for all our whānau that were there. And I remember this because I had one of our bros who stood up afterwards, and he did a mihi to Lionel, and he said to him, bro, I need to apologise to you and your people. And then Lionel was like, oh, why? And we were like, oh, why? He goes, you know, that's the first time I've actually heard anything to do with Aboriginal culture. And then said, and the reason why that is that, like, I've always thought of Aborigines as, drunk, homeless. Like, I just thought they were all, lazy. I had this really negative racist view of Aboriginal people until I've just met you. And in the last 3 hours, it's just really made me realize that I had a real racist attitude to thing, and had been here for like 30 years. And it was, and I'm not saying, I'm only sort of recounting that because it was quite surprising, but he, just that one little exposure was able to change his viewpoint. That, and I got up and I did a mihi to him afterwards, and Lionel was awesome. He goes, all good, brothers. Don't worry about it, And then afterwards, I had a corridor. I had a corridor with him, and I said, all those things that you said, Aborigines are drunk, they're always in trouble, they're always beating up their wives, they're always in gangs, they're always in prison. I said, man, who does that sound like? And he was like, oh yeah, it sounds like Maoris. I said, yeah, where would that story come from? So those kind of cordial about us being at the lower end, that's our whānau here. And so that's why I guess part of it, there's two reasons, is that I can appreciate their journey, because although it wasn't exactly the same, uniquely the same, our whānau went through the same thing. And we are fortunate enough now that we had pioneers, our leaders, rangatira back in the day, in the 30s and the 20s, 1930s, 1920s, right up through to the 70s, the 80s, where they started getting educated, and they then used the system to fight for our rights, fight for our mokopuna, their mokopuna at the time. To now, when you look at our culture, when people think of New Zealand, Aotearoa, Māori culture is 99% in that mindset of being intertwined in the real identity of our country. And it's still not perfect, and our whānau are still, still at the wrong end of the scales in terms of, high unemployment, high incarceration rates. But it is changing slowly. And these are things that, we can apply because we've learned all that from back home. And the other, I guess one of the main reasons I'm so passionate about is that, we, as a teacher of Māori culture, passing on this Māori knowledge, that we are linked to the whenua, we know how to manaaki, we have these real strong customs and values that we're trying to instill in our whānau here. It's almost hypocritical to do that without acknowledging, the land that we're on, I suppose, is, we can't really, pay tribute to Paputuanaku when, the traditional owners of this real land can't even do that themselves, So for me, that's part of the passion of why, I'm really, I guess I'm always advocating for us to do more, because we, and not just Māori, Pacifica, like, we have this thing, there's this thing about us, our whānau, the way that we roll, the way that we talk, our humour, and other cultures, when they see us, they love it. They love the energy that we have. And I think there's a little bit of, envy about it, because no matter how pohara we look, no matter how many no shoes our kids have, other communities, Pākehā communities, they go, man, how come you guys are always so happy? You're always singing, man, your kids are always, they're overweight, but they've got no shoes, but they're always happy. And I think that's the power of what we have. We have a real energy about us. So when we go to events, or when we go everywhere we go, sometimes we have to remember, the effects, how we can affect those around us, the other communities around us. And, it hasn't been a hard thing. Like, we created at Tihani, we created a really strong relationship with our indigenous whānau, our Orangi whānau and our Bunurong whānau. And that's just because, when they've had events, we've just turned up. we've stood in the back. We haven't tried to be at the front and, you know, been, hey, here we are. But we've just stood up and we've just shared the moments that really matter for them. And you know, sometimes that's all it's about. It's that kanohi kite. Kanohi kite is the seeing face. So when you're seeing it around places without necessarily wanting to, you know, be at the forefront or make the loudest noise, but just be there to support tautoko in the kitchen or wherever, then, you know, that you can't buy that stuff, you know. And that's why for a community that has been treated so badly still, you know, that means a lot, you know. So it's not rocket science, it's just treating people like humans, I guess, you know. So yeah. 1967, that's when, you know, they were finally recognized to be humans. So in the referendum, national referendum. So, you know, that wasn't that long ago. Yeah. My dad was still boxing around then. So, you know, so yeah, that's where all that comes from, that energy, that drive. And we've got beautiful relationships, and it's actually helped me get into my new job. So yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your job.
Wow, I'm glad you asked. So I'm the Aboriginal Inclusion Officer for the Victorian Electoral Commission. I'm still trying to find a way that makes it sound really sexy, but it's, yeah, it is what it is. The VEC. It's not the FBI or the CIA or the MI6, but it's the VEC. So yeah, and so basically all I have to do, or all they want me to do, is to increase Aboriginal communities' participation in voting. So, you know, they want more of the Aboriginal community to actually have a say in who's in that political landscape. And when one of Tanza's cousins sent me the role, because I'd been down here at Frankston Council for about 5 years, and they sent me the job, and I was like, oh man, that doesn't sound very, definitely doesn't sound sexy. Like VEC, who are they again? And then I saw the role, and I was like, oh, Aboriginal Inclusion Officer, you know. And then they said the role was like, you know, to increase, you know, participation. And I had a look at it and I had to think about it. I thought, wow, man, that'd be a really hard job. Because, you know, part of it is like, why would you want to vote for a system that is still clearly, you know, pretty racist to your people? You know, no wonder hardly any of them vote. So that was the corridor I was having in my head, and I thought, wow, it'd be pretty hard. But I again, then I reflected back on the time where I was growing up back in the 70s and the 80s, and my parents, man, they were full-on activists. My childhood wasn't one of, you know, playing sports and going, you know, every Saturday and da-da-da. Mine was going around to rallies and political party movements with all the, you know, all those activists, you know, Matt Rata and the political parties, Fitu Sullivan. They all used to come to our house because mum and them would have them at home because they were right into the land rights campaigning back then. They were up at Bastion Point. And so my childhood was going around. I was a kaupapa kid. So I'd follow around wherever their hui were, their wānanga, with all the other activists, those Maori activists that were always getting into trouble and protesting and getting arrested. That was my life. And as much as I kind of hated it back then, because, you know, you'd be driving around the country all the time, you'd end up, you know, as a kid, you'd be like, oh man, these bloody meetings are boring as, but you know, when you're in that environment, it kind of, you know, obviously it subconsciously sinks into there. And I was laughing about it the other day. Is the irony is that, you know, when I got out of home, I was like, oh man, I want to be like my mum, because, you know, we had a few challenging, you know, discussions, and I thought, oh well, you know, whatever, I know best. I left home, and then yeah, that's the irony, is that now I'm kind of doing exactly the same thing as what she did back in those days, but helping a mana whenua here to try and find the way to get into the system and change it from within, which is a huge task. But it is about that, you know, you can either keep banging on the windows, I suppose, and shouting outside, or, you know, get into the inside and change it from within. But yeah, there's so much healing and stuff that still needs to be done. But I'm thankful that, you know, in the time I've been with VC for about almost 3 months now, that my management have been pretty open to some of the concepts and the out of it ideas I've had, because they've kind of struggled. I'm the first person that's from outside the Aboriginal community that they've actually gotten into this role, because they've had a lot of trouble trying to just, you know, navigating that political space in terms of the iwi, the Hapuu here. There's a lot of politics and a lot of, yeah, just a lot of healing, I think. But to represent a government, an impartial government organisation, to say, hey, come and vote, you know, there needs to be a lot of work done. But again, you know, imagine that 30 years time, if we can start, you know, creating some awesome foundations now, 30, 40 years time, they could have, you know, a lot more of their people in government and in parliament like back home now. I mean, you look at the way that our cabinet and even the opposition is made up. You know, there's Māori in there with tāmoko, full tāmoko faces, moko kauai. And again, if I, you know, had that way to send a message back to our tupuna back in the 1890s and say, hey, man, guess what? Man, we've got whānau with their full tāmoko face, papa, you know, tupuna. Man, that's where you find the sacrifice, and we're doing it. And that's kind of the story that I'm going to try and use with our Aboriginal whānau here. Just set that example that we have back home. You know, and it's taken, what are we now, almost 50 years, 60 years since all those radicals like Sid Jackson and Donna Awatere, and, you know, a lot of those ones that were, man, they used to come out of home, and they were young back then, and I was like a little kid, but I used to hear them all, and they were fired up, and they were like, yeah, we're going to go and, you know, break down some fence, or, you know, ask some white fellow for rent because they were on land that, you know, should have been back with our Māori people. But, you know, they were the leaders back then. And they're, through their sacrifice, you know, we're here now. Yeah. Did I breathe again? You see, I'm passionate about it, I suppose, eh? So
it's awesome. It's awesome to hear. Yeah. So much of your journey. Well, you know, there's so much of it I still don't know about, but this is an awesome episode and moment in time to get to know you better. And
yeah, well, awesome. Thank you. I think, you know, it's just being in the right space and actually listening to, you know, my tupuna to push me in the right direction. You know, because yeah, I've traveled around and had some pretty interesting ups and downs, but, you know, now you know, I'm in a beautiful space at the moment, in amongst some amazing kaupapa, doing some amazing things, surrounded by some amazing people. And, you know, there's that you know, that quote that they talk about, you know, surrounding yourself in the right environment and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes you think, man, that's all bloody rubbish. But, you know, for me, I wake up every day and I think, oh man, this is pretty awesome. That's not to say it's not hard. It's tiring. I've got to have some really good mechanisms to try and release a lot of the stuff that I invariably take on. And because you know, because obviously I'm not busy enough. I'm actually, last year I started university for the first time. So, you know, and that in itself was probably the scariest thing. Like all these other things I'm involved in, easy, but going back to school, man, there was some big wānanga going on there. I'll tell you that.
Do you study youth work, eh?
Pardon?
Are you studying youth work?
Yeah. So doing my youth work degree, you know, it's kind of sounds like typical, you know, do it the backwards way around, like get all the experience first and then get the qualification. But you know, but it's actually been, you know, it's been really interesting. Is that and my bro Paretekawa, him and I joined together, and we had to kind of picky each other up. It's like, come on, bro, yeah, we can do this. Yeah, can we do this? is that a space for us, man? You know, kind of that conversation. And we had to really work through some real barriers in our mind to go through with it. Thankfully, we've got a really cool little tight knit group in our of Kiwis and some other Māori people in our course. So we kind of we've kind of banded together and we sort of help each other. But it was the irony is that we felt that going into an institution like that wasn't the place for us. None of my siblings have been to university, and I think same with Polders. And I think it's that it's a symptom of that upbringing where we were told that education wasn't for us. And so when I was at school, man, I wasn't the most brightest thing, but student, but that was probably more because I wasn't really focusing on being an academic. But going into university, for me, it felt like I was going into the lion's den of all these. That's where all these people that come out, they get a university degree and they come out and they think they know it all, and then that's why then they and again, my own bias about people, especially white people, coming out and then working with our young people, with all these theories and concepts that that they're not holistic, they're not Māori or knowledge, they're real Western framework stuff. But it was really refreshing to get in there, and we had some cool lecturers that were like, because I opened up to one of our main course lecturers and I said, look, I'm not really sure whether this is the right place for me, because I see things from a real holistic sort of cultural lens, and I'm worried about coming into this because it's a square box Western lens. And then I actually found that all the lecturers I've had so far have been really really open people that can see the system, the Western system, for all its fallacies, for all its negatives, and they love the fact that people come in with these different cultural ideas. So that was a real shifter for me to know that I'd actually go in and be, I guess, culturally safe, and know that I actually had something to contribute, which then feeds that whole concept for me of going out into working in organisations like Vic Police or DHHS or schools, especially Western organisations, and know that the knowledge that I carry actually is something really relevant and can actually help. And I think that's half the problem with our community and a lot of our people, is that they don't feel that being Māori or being Pacifica, we've actually got something to offer to the Western system. Because for years the Western system has oppressed us and oppressed our knowledge, our ancestors, our tupuna. So that's another little thing that I like to that I want to try and shift, and it's working with a lot of people that are around me. But I think it's something we need to uplift in our people more, is that we can be Māori or we can be Tongan, Samoan, whoever, and not necessarily be the stereotypes that the system thinks we are. But our knowledge around whānau and our connection to Huiao, to the natural environments, those things are real powerful things, which I think right now even the Western world need more. They need it right now because, the system that they're used to under COVID has put a lot of pressure on people that they normally would never have experienced. And yet you see our communities, we still suffer, but because we are closer to our whānau, we have more supports around us naturally. So it's, COVID probably, and I only speak for, I don't speak for everybody, but, COVID, from the connections that I have, hasn't affected as many people. Or those ones that it has, they've had people, they haven't been as isolated. Yeah, so, yeah. How we get onto that? What, man, see what you do? You just like, these little breadcrumbs down. I'm just like, jump into that.
And it's cool. And then this will go out into the community, and then there'll be this amazing ripple effect.
Yeah, I don't know. There'll be some of them going, there's that Jez again on his pai having a bloody big yarn about stuff. Yeah, but yeah.
Like, why not?
Yeah, why not? I suppose, why not? I wouldn't be here if I had that whole, let that stop me. I would have given up years ago, I suppose. But if you can just change one person's frame of mind just for a split second, and that's all they need to make some changes, and realize some other things, then all good, all good. One person at a time, one
Yeah.
person at a time.
And like platforms where you can share that, like that old knowledge and that indigenous knowledge,
Yeah,
creating a sense of pride in our
yeah,
culture. In our
yeah,
culture,
that's right.
for many years, it, we didn't have that. Like
Yeah,
I grew up in Mangere in South Auckland, and whenever we went into Palangi areas, we weren't wanted there. We weren't welcome
yeah,
there. It wasn't cool to be an islander at times, like unless we were within our own community.
yeah,
So to be able to have that knowledge, and it's our knowledge,
yeah,
our knowledge
yeah,
that helps us like grow our self-esteem, grow our pride, grow our spirit is a really special thing. And you're right. I think during COVID, we definitely saw in a lot of other communities, especially in our some Palangi communities, like just the lack of relationships in those spaces that weren't helping keep them strong during those times. And whether it's relationships with people and each other, but also relationships to elements, to the whenua, to natural
yeah,
environment. Say, like I think everyone started to realize how complex we had made our lives when there
yeah.
were actually some real just simple things we can do to ground ourselves that are free. Like
Oh, yeah, free.
that are free
Yeah,
and open for everyone to try and to use,
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I like what you said about their confidence. Confidence in being our beautiful Pacifica selves. You know, the crack up thing that for me, like, and I know there's a couple, there's others in there, and I'm not alone. But the beauty of it is that I laugh about still is that people ring me up to go in and work in the organisations that like either liaise or consult or whatever, but they want me to be in there because I'm Māori. And how funny is that? That when I was younger, we felt that we needed to be Pākehā, because that's what our parents wanted us to be that way because they were disciplined if they weren't. So you go full circle now where society has changed so much that I can go in and be Māori. I got so many stories, but funny ones. But I had this beautiful school up here in Frankston, who they like 1,900 kids, and probably 1,850 of them are Australian European background. But they asked us to go in there and do some Māori stuff because what we were talking and what we were teaching it came in a Māori package, but the values and stuff were human ones. They were ones that the school could relate to and then justify having that different methodology. But I remember one of my first presentations at the school, and lucky because the wellbeing lady, beautiful lady up there, Steph, one of my good mates, she asked me to come in and do a presentation to their whole year 9 school, and again I don't know how. I was expecting maybe 50, 60 kids. There were like 350 kids in the auditorium when I walked in. I was like, holy Jesus! All right, cool, okay, lucky because I'll go in. And I had a manager with me at the time, and like I had these jeans, shorts on, had my t-shirt on, and I had a presentation, but my presentations are mainly pictures, so I kind of just ad lib off the pictures, and then I had my taiaha, and when I got in there, and Steph came and greeted me, and she's like, "Oh, hey, you all good? Good to go?" Yeah, yeah, all good. And then I said, I didn't realize there were many kids, but all good. Anyway, walked out there, had my taiaha, and then stood in the middle of, actually took my shoes off. And my manager, there's council, Frankston Council, there's OH&S stuff all around, walking bare feet and stuff, or even just a professional sort of standard. But, because I'm Māori, I could go in there with my bare feet and my shorts and a t-shirt start waving my taiaha around and doing a big, whakāturanga demonstration whirl, scaring these kids in the front row. And man, they loved it. They loved it. And, it sounds funny now. But I still think about these things that, now I can actually go in, be Māori, be proud to be Māori, and present in a Māori way, in a holistic way, because I think I was there talking about leadership or identity and stuff like that. But, and I've done that heaps of times, but, it's always a interesting one that, if I could tell that to my tupuna or my grandparents, say, hey, man, I can go into schools now and with bare feet and, jump around with my taiaha and do Māori things. And, the Pālangis they love it, I mean, it's an example, but the challenge is still to for a lot of our Māori people and Pacific people to be proud of their culture and to learn about their culture. The beauty of what we're doing here in Melbourne is that we've got a real network now of amazing Pacifica initiatives. You can do Māori stuff, you can do Niuean stuff. There's a hula group that's going on. There's so many kaupapa Pacifica stuff going on that it's kind of, back in the 80s, 90s, 70s, you probably had an excuse if you didn't do any of that stuff because it wasn't around or it wasn't really, looked upon to do. But now there's no excuse because it's everywhere, and again, that's a reflection of the work that a lot of us have done to keep it at the forefront and really to nurture, because we want to nurture our kids in it, so.
Totally.
Yeah.
I could talk for hours.
Yeah. I've got to be the only one that can walk around a school in a Pākehā school with a fierce-looking spear looking for kids. I did this one time with these kids that were meant to be in my class, Māori kids. And I was like, where's those boys? And they're like, oh, they're getting up to mischief in another class. And I was like, right, walking down in my bare feet. One of the year teachers came, oh, you look, I said, I'm looking for those two boys. They were like, oh, they're over there. And they were mucking around in this class. And one of the teachers was trying to get them out of their class because they were meant to be in there. They were meant to be with me. I was walking down, I get out of there, get out of there. It's like ripped into them. And then we cracked up about it afterwards. I was like, man, there's not many people could walk around in bare feet with a spear looking really, really angry. That's not even a teacher on staff, but, running a program and not get, the police called on them. But I mean, I laugh about it now, but afterwards you think, oh man, probably lucky I'm getting away with that stuff because some people probably get arrested. But it's the irony of where we're at the moment. We can be who we are in the environments that we normally wouldn't feel comfortable to be who we are. But I think society is ready for it and society needs us.
Yeah, I think so too. And thank you for
Woo! Far out.
Awesome. I don't want to keep you all night, even though I reckon we could talk for a few more hours. I'm sure you've got lots.
Don't get me started. I haven't even got a cup of tea. If I had a cup of tea here, man, we'd be going all nights.
Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. Get your tea. Your partner will be like, hello.
Yeah.
Is there, before we let you go, is there any words of wisdom, or I know you've just given me an hour of it, but is there anything else that you'd like to share?
I don't know. Just
sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. Now that you're actually making me think about that, it's a hard thing to think about, but it all just comes out in the stories. But no, I think it's just finding the space that fits for you. For a lot of our Māori community, sometimes we think that kapahaka has to be the pinnacle of being Māori, but there are so many other doorways that lead into learning things te ao Māori, like weaving and other avenues that are really strong now. So you don't necessarily have to be a performer to feel connected to your culture. There's many other ways now that are actually really thriving. So if anything, especially for our Māori community, is that just be brave. And here it's it's probably a safer place to learn to reconnect with your culture than it is back home, because there's no expectation here. You can go in and try te reo, try maurako, try wakama, try all the other different things that are happening at the moment, and not feel that you're going to be judged, because that's the counter to our culture being so strong now, is that there's so many people that are so really good at it. It's like, oh man, I'm not going to go and deal with those guys because they're real, but here there's lots of opportunities. So that's probably my only advice, is that if you want to learn the real knowledge behind being Māori, not the knowledge that has been suppressed, or the knowledge that was given to us because that's what the white system wanted us to know or think about ourselves. Just be brave. Just go and have a try. Yeah. So just be you. Yeah. But no, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to come and just have a bit of a kōrero and share. It's again, I always crack up at myself going, man, look at you, Mary, for flesh fellow trying to talk about all this white stuff. But really, it's just through experience. And I've had my ups and downs. I've made my own bad decisions through life. But I think I'm in the right space where I'm meant to be, and it must be because things just keep happening. Really positive things just keep happening. So yeah, part of that's just accepting what you're meant to be doing. Yeah.
When you're talking about there's all different ways to connect with your culture, man. Living Koko.
Yeah.
Through our kai.
Through our kai, through community, giving back to our community, providing opportunities for community. Exactly what you do here. And it's not just local, it's those ripples go all across to Moana Nui a Kiwa, they go back over to the islands. So, and again, it's about using the system, knowing how to run a business, knowing how to be educated, and putting a process together that can benefit our people. What better way to be Pacifica person than to create something that's going to benefit your village and your tribe and your people around the motus. Yeah, so big mihi to you too, sister. Beautiful work, and it's that's the way we support and keep our people alive.
Beautiful sister called Emily Apiaki. She runs Tupuanga Coffee. It's a coffee plantation back in Tonga. We use her coffee for our chocolates too. She's a youth worker.
Awesome.
She has a youth practice in Auckland.
Yeah.
But, she keeps saying that, and it was her that it really kind of hit home for me when she said, we're the ones that we're able to walk the two worlds.
Yeah.
So we've been blessed to be able to go into it like a Palangi space and understand the way they do things.
Yeah.
And that knowledge that can help with the linkage of like supporting our communities back home and supporting our communities here. Right.
Yeah.
And if anyone out there can see a reflection in what we do at Living Koko and loves what we're doing, and it it inspires them, or whether something is created out of inspiration or jealousy, I don't know, but man, just create it and get some learnings from it.
That's right. Yeah.
If it isn't your jam, that's okay, because you learned something. Maybe you learned it's not your jam, but
you've learned something. But that's the thing, but just have a go.
Yeah.
The worst thing about it is if you don't try, then you don't learn anything. You don't learn how to succeed or what to do better, or that it's not for you. You just have a go. But man, I loved it. Ever since I first met you at the museum when we did that, the taonga, I loved your kaupapa. It's beautiful, and it's a perfect way of creating different opportunities for our whānau and our community. And then the resources. Again, it's not about financial, monetary gain, because sometimes our people get a bit think about, but you're making money. It's still a way of continuing to keep our people employed and alive and resourced, creating opportunities for our kids. So yeah.
And I think if anyone ever starts their own, when you start your first a small business, you soon learn that you don't make money within the first month. Like
Yeah.
you're working 2 to 3 jobs trying to keep it going. You may be making it look like from the outside that you're a big business, but it's you
Yeah.
running 100 miles an hour trying to keep that work going.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah. And being the duck on the surface,
no way.
legs underneath. Woo! Yeah.
Pretending everything is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. No, I got this. You know, it's yeah. Yeah. No, no. Much credit to you, sister. It's mean. I love your work.
Yeah.
Right.
Love your work too, Jeremy. Thank you so much for tonight. And I'm gonna put this up pretty much as it is.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Oh, yeah. One take. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me nui rawatu kia koe e te tuahine. Yeah, thank you very much for your beautiful invitation and giving me the chance to have a bit of just a chat, just a yarn, and share some stories with you and your listeners and your viewers. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. You take care. I'm gonna
Yes.
hang up now. Actually, I'm gonna stop recording.
Okay, ka pai. Ka pai.